Jai Shri Ram. One of the negative aspects of modern American culture that I see that I think that deserves a lot more criticism is the obsession that people have with brands. So, for example, Starbucks would be a good example to talk about. People will routinely spend several dollars a day on some kind of coffee or coffee like beverage from that particular company, and you'll always see them carrying around this cup that has this logo on it, and it feels kind of like they're using this as almost an accessory or a prop that you're trying to say, oh, I live this certain kind of a lifestyle, I have I'm this certain kind of a person, right? I think that if you're born and raised here in America and you were to try to conjure up what kind of a person would you say is like this, outside of just drinking these coffee like drinks, there's a lot of other things that people might associate with that. So it's kind of like an idea of, if I associate myself with this brand and I use this item from this brand as a prop, this is going to somehow show how I'm affiliated with this kind of a lifestyle, okay? And thought process, worldview, so on and so forth. On the other side of the cultural spectrum among white Americans, you have country music listeners. Now, here, people would look at the Starbucks type of person as being kind of liberal and soft and weak and effeminate and feigning sophistication and so on and so forth. And they would see themselves as obviously being very different from that. But there's one very interesting thing that they have in common. Again, the point of this video is about brands, is that the country music type of crowd is also really interested in brands. References to Budweiser beer, Chevrolet automobiles, particular brands of chewing tobacco, and so on are commonly found throughout the songs of this genre. From their view, they see these kinds of products as affirming this down-to-earth, American, socially conservative, working class kind of an identity that people who prefer this genre of music would tend to have. But it's just basically the other side of the coin that I mentioned from the Starbucks crowd. It's kind of like educated, urban, socially liberal people are more the Starbucks version of this, and less college educated, more rural, more working class kinds of people are more of this kind of Budweiser and Chevrolet and whatever kind of a crowd. You're looking at these different brands, affiliating with them, buying their products to kind of uphold this kind of a manufactured identity that you have of yourself. And it lies in contrast to real, meaningful, deeply held differences that have existed through American history due to class differences, regional differences, and the urban-rural divide in the past that I think that today is pretty much almost totally eroded away. You still see it showing up in things like voting patterns, church attendance, and stuff like that. But as far as it being basically two fundamentally different kinds of people, or more than two, which it certainly was kind of prior to the age of the internet, prior to the age of mass media, and in an earlier part of history prior to the 1950s interstate highway system that allowed and propelled all of this travel around the country. So you only have the vestiges of this kind of a thing remaining in those things that I said, like voting patterns and so on. But the actual meaningful differences are gone away. And the reason that I'm talking about this is because you get to a certain point in a society, or American culture has gotten to a certain point in society, where people have lost touch with who they really are and their real identity, but they have kind of nostalgic and sentimental feelings towards either that identity or a new identity that they're trying to craft for themselves. And so they're associating with things that really have no history or meaning in any deep kind of way. They only have meaning among other people who are thinking along the same lines, because they've also undergone the same shift and erosion of identity. Now, I wanted to shift to a related idea, which is that of symbols. So obviously brands being used as symbols is what I just mentioned. Now I wanted to talk about actual symbols, two specific symbols just to illustrate this point that are common in Western culture. One is the color pink, and one is the rainbow. So, of course, if you think about the color pink in modern Western culture, it's seen as a symbol of femininity, right? Women wear pink clothes, babies will be, wrapped in pink blankets, so on and so forth. It's kind of universally in Western culture understood to be a symbol for femininity. But if you look into the history of that, that's a fairly new thing. I mean, there was a point in time when light blue was actually seen as feminine and pink was seen as a boy's color, because red was masculine and pink was seen as kind of a youthful version of red. And you have, other periods of time where neither color had these kinds of gendered associations with them. And I'll link a video from someone else that describes kind of the history of this. But now you see that this is firmly entrenched into people's minds to the point where even people who may not really care about this, if they use the color pink in something like their clothing or something, people will think, oh, you're purposely trying to use that color for some reason, right? And I think that here again, I mean, you're just taking it's a color. It's just a color in the color spectrum that you're taking to mean some, deep, meaningful thing about gender, which I think when you have traditional social values related to gender, you don't get wrapped up in X color is feminine, X color is masculine, because everyone in your culture understands what masculinity is. They understand what femininity is. They understand what's expected from men in the society, expected from women in the society, and people by and large actually behave that way. So you don't need to try to find these values in something totally meaningless like colors, right? And another example, like I said, is the rainbow. Now, of course, in modern Western culture today, people think of rainbows as being a symbol of the LGBT movement because in the last few decades or whatever, they've basically co-opted this symbol to represent themselves. But here in the West, if you look at history, this was actually a Christian symbol before that. So if you read the Bible in the Old Testament, there is a story where God, meaning the Abrahamic God, floods the entire world or causes it to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. There's a flood. Prior to this, he gets this person named Noah to build an ark, put his family in, take all these animals in. It's a long story. And after all of this ends and Noah and his family exit the ark, they see a rainbow. And this rainbow is a symbol of the Abrahamic God's promise to not flood the earth again and kill everything again. So it was always seen after Europe became Christianized, the rainbow was seen as a symbol of God's love and promise to, kind of continue to protect and be in a relationship with humanity. And, I don't like Christianity. I don't agree with any of the things that it says, but I think it's far more superior to kind of modern secular moral degeneracy. And to see, a rainbow symbol that, again, like I said, had overtly Christian religious themes in the past, be co-opted by them really shows you that, like I was saying with the brands being, people assigning a value to brands and then it becoming a symbol of identity, people assigning a value to the color pink, that becoming part of an identity. Symbols themselves don't really mean anything. Symbols only have meaning from whatever people take them to mean. And, what that is changes over time, because you have to do, if a symbol has a certain meaning at the beginning, then it changes over time because someone has co-opted it. Then no one knows the original meaning anymore until they do research, right? I mean, an example of that Hindus would be very familiar with is the swastika, right? Here in the West, or specifically America, UK, and so on, people take the swastika as a symbol of Nazi Germany. They're not aware that it was a Hindu symbol, a dharmic symbol, and even a symbol in other cultures prior to that, and it was, auspicious and so on and so forth, because you have to do research, or you have to have that explained to you if you come from this culture in order to know that. what the symbol means is whatever it means to people in the particular culture at that particular time. And again, I'm trying to say this to harp on the fact that when you get too wrapped up in symbolism, when you get too wrapped up in I have a certain actual value system, let's say with respect to class identity, that may actually be grounded in something meaningful, right? But if that kind of value system actually pervades your thinking, your worldview, and the society that you live in, you don't then need to try to find symbols to represent that. Same thing with pink and the whole gender thing. Anytime you need to kind of use symbols to kind of, represent who you are, represent the kind of thought process that you have, you've totally lost whatever argument that you have. If you're a socially conservative, traditional, spiritual kind of a person, you've totally lost that argument. And I wanted to end on this. When I was in college, and also, you see this online too, a lot of people on their laptops will have a lot of different stickers, right? And you sometimes see this with bumper stickers on cars that people will, you can tell their like political views, what sports teams they root for, what brands they like, what music they like to listen to, all of these kinds of things by looking at the mess of stickers that's on their laptop or something like that. And I think that this is a sign of a very, very deeply rooted social problem that it's so far gone that you really can't reverse it. And again, that social problem that I'm trying to state is that actual values that mean something to your culture have been totally eroded away. And so you're trying to preserve the shadows and the vestiges of that by assigning that value to some kind of symbol or some kind of brand or some kind of label or some kind of person. And then now it's your affiliation with that thing that is your idea of continuing to hold this kind of a value system moving forward. And I think if you've gotten to that point, it's all over. There's no future left from there, because not only is it just the image of something that's remaining, but it's not even the image of that thing originally. It's the image of a new thing that you've taken to mean that kind of a value system for yourself subjectively. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Jai Shri Ram.